And that's how we go. Thank you, Rosalia, for coming in. I know you couldn't take time out earlier, so good that you're here and you've got your presentation already. But first, of course, you have to introduce yourself and we take it from there. And I don't come in like, oh, I don't come in up till you don't ask me to come in.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Vikram, first of all, for inviting me to be part of this symposium. I had the opportunity to hear some of your speakers, and I have to say I'm very impressed. Really, what a lineup of international mediators all over the world, globally. I mean, I'm very honored to be invited. Uh, so humbly, okay. Who am I? Basically, I'm Canadian. I was born in Canada, Montreal. I'm in the province of Quebec. I'm an accredited mediator. I'm also a civil servant. I'm trained in law. I'm a jurist, basically. I started off as a lawyer, I guess, and moved into more mediation in my job as a civil servant, which suits me better, suits my personality much better than litigation. Uh, so you'll see from the presentation that I'm giving today, basically, what I'm going to be talking about is mostly an overview of Canada's modern mediation culture. The reason why I say modern is because it's compared to the older countries, older European countries, and globally, Canada's culture in mediation is quite new. I would say when I say modern, it's in the 80s. So that's where I'm just going to give an evolution, sort of an overview at how the culture evolved here, because if we want to go into past, we would have to dig really deep, and we would need anthropologists to do some more extensive research. I'm sure there's a lot out there that we don't know about, and it would be mostly in the indigenous culture, because Canada's old history would go with indigenous cultures. The first peoples of Canada are the indigenous peoples. So,
But Rosalia, I said I won't come in, but now I'm going to come in. You have to tell us more about the work you've done in the UN and everything, such interesting work you've done. And you're not talking about that. You have to talk about that.
okay. Okay. So basically, okay, well, like I said, I'm trained in law. My specialty is international law. And I had my first love is international law, and I did work at the UN. I was a legal officer in the treaty section, the Office of Legal Affairs. I started off by when I was in law school. I did my internship there. I decided I was going to go work at the UN when I was 12 years old. When my parents first took us to New York and I saw the building, I said, wow. There was something about it. And then I went back. I went back to the United Nations. When I was in high school, we had a field trip. I actually I forgot about that. You're just reminding me. When I was in high school in my senior year, I had a world history class, and I had a fantastic history teacher who taught us world history, world politics. And we ended up going to the UN as a field trip. And I still remember when I walked in there, I just walked in, and we had a tour, and we had learned also about the UN Charter and whatnot. And I just had this feeling. I said, you know what, I'm going to be working here. This I feel at home. So that always stayed at the back of my mind. It influenced my line of studies. I studied in my first undergraduate degree was in political science. And of course, I always gravitated towards international relations. And I had this course on the United Nations international law. I had a fantastic professor His name was Henry Abi at Concordia University, and I knew it was I was going to specialize in international law. So after my undergraduate degree in political science, I decided to study in law, and but I always gravitated towards courses in international law, and then I ended up in graduate degrees of from public international law to private international law, which is international commercial law. I really touched the whole realm. Like I always felt that I didn't know enough. And during my law degree, while I was doing my law degree, I decided I was going to do an internship at the United Nations. So I applied. I went to the UN. I showed up. This was in 1992. I showed up at the United Nations on my birthday. I said, and I went there, and I asked at the information desk if they had a HR department, if they hired students. So they told me that they did hire students, and it was they had they were internships, because I figured, let me try it out for the summer. So I was lucky. This was before 9/11. The UN was much more open. It was you could walk in with your passport, and it was a different world at the time. It was wonderful. I mean, so open, which is what it's meant to be, as it's a place of dialogue. And I was able to, I remember I gave, so I asked the person at the information desk if I could meet someone from HR, and then I gave them my passport, and they said, when they saw that it was my birthday that day, they said, you know what, I'll send you upstairs to the HR department. So I went upstairs, I filled out an application, not knowing where it was going to go. And I forgot about it. I was happy. I met with the internship coordinator, and I basically asked some questions. I said I was interested in working here, and that's it. And then I came back home. I continued my studies, and a few months later, I was called, and I was told that I was accepted for the internship. And what I did was, when I applied for that internship, I remember you were supposed to indicate which department you wanted to work for. So obviously I chose legal, but in the legal office, there are different branches. And I just chose the treaty section because it just resonated with me from my undergraduate studies in political science, because I had to negotiate and draft a treaty between, at the time, I was the mediator. My role was to play the mediator, and I was representing Italy, and I had to negotiate. I had to basically negotiate between two different countries. But I was the Italian mediator. The teacher decided to name me the Italian mediator, I guess because of my name. So I chose the treaty section, because I remember that when I was doing my research in the library, I was fascinated by all the treaty documents that I had to go through, all the treaties. So I ended up in the treaty section, which actually worked in my favor. And the reason why I was selected was because I went to law school in French at Université Laval in Quebec City, and I needed to draft both in English and in French. So, I was competing with graduate students from Ivy League universities like Columbia, Harvard, and whatnot. And here I am, a little Canadian student from a very good university, Université Laval, but if you put it in competition with Oxford or Harvard, I mean, it's not at the top of the list. So I came in, and I loved it. I actually I had a wonderful chief at the time. She was a French national. I still remember the chief of the treaty section at the time was Madame Carrie Messing, a wonderful woman. And the team the team of lawyers that were working there, I felt like I walked into, I was so privileged. I was working with lawyers from literally all over the world. Uh, I remember every day that I had to go into work, which I wasn't paid for the internships, because the internships at the United Nations are not paid. Okay. Uh, I just felt this well of pride. I said, I can't believe I'm coming in here among all these amazing, wonderful minds. But what was so amazing was that these were lawyers from all over the world, from different nationalities, different cultures, but the mindset, it was similar. At the same time, I was saying, wow, we're just from so many different cultures, but we just resonate, we think alike, and I had so much fun. I was always smiling. I was happy. I was so happy going into work. I didn't care if it was free. I didn't care that I was there for 4 months, and basically as a student, not being paid, it was difficult to living in New York. So I had to share an apartment with the friends that I was lucky enough, and I was living at the time in Harlem. And in 1993, Harlem was not regentrified as it is today. So it was a little bit rough, but I didn't care. I used to take the A train and go down to Grand Central, which is Midtown New York, and walk to the UN. And it was the best summer of my life. And then when I graduated from law school, I said, well, okay, well, let me see if they need somebody for the summer. And then I'll come back and I'll do I'll do my bar, go and finish my bar and get my license as a lawyer. So I called up my old, at the time, she was the deputy chief. I called her up and I said, do you need anybody for the summer? I had just finished all my law studies and whatnot. And I also did some specialization in international law, and I'm planning on doing more graduate courses in international law. And so she said, you know what? We actually do need someone. We have somebody that left on maternity leave. Would you be interested in replacing her for a year on for a contract? And I said, sure. When do you want me there? So that's basically my history. I returned to the UN in the treaty section. I worked there for another year, and it was very formative. Was wonderful, and it launched me in my international law career at the time there. And I had the opportunity to basically draft treaties, also give training. I had to deal with different member states. And at the time, the most, for the treaty section, the busiest time of the year was usually from June until now. Now the General Assembly is about to open in September, because a lot of the member states try to register many of the treaties before the opening of the General Assembly. So I was quite busy drafting and redrafting and negotiating, and also you have to also when you register treaties, that there's a format that it has to be followed. So you have to ensure that the countries have everything pro forma, and you always have to return to the member states and have them modify the writing, or sometimes they have to renegotiate certain clauses or whatnot. So it was an exciting time. My experience as a legal officer was different than my experience as an intern. As an intern, I was more free. It's because I was working for free. I had more free time. I was able to socialize more. But when I was working as a legal officer, it was very intense. It was quite intense, I would say. But it was very enriching. So, and since then, since 19 when I went back, actually it was in 1997, but from 93 until today, I'm still involved at the United Nations. I'm involved more as a volunteer in NGOs and IGOs, and I'm also involved. I got involved with UNCTAD trial also, the United Nations International Trade Law Commission, and I've been invited as a delegate. Because I represented a non-governmental organization. I started doing that since I was in law school and then graduate school. And I really enjoy it. What I love about going there is the interaction with different representatives of different member states and also different NGOs, IGOs, you name it. I mean, it's just it's a fascinating place. Don't get me wrong, there's also a lot of challenges. What comes with the cultural diversity, there are also challenges, and that's where it taught me a lot on how to be how to adapt my mindset, because you have to realize, I mean, we're all products of our environment. So we work and think in a certain way, and we have to realize that when we're dealing with somebody that's been brought up in a different culture and a different society, a different system, we have to put ourselves in their shoes, and I think that's the biggest lesson that I learned in my involvement at the UN and my work at the UN, and also in my continued involvement. But I love it. I enjoy the interaction. So that's my background now.
No,
So I
Rosalia,
returned here.
yeah, exactly. Now what we're doing is that in conversation with a beautiful mind episode we're doing first, we'll do the presentation after that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Perfect. No, this
You
is
see, you
perfect.
shouldn't have gotten me there, because I can talk for hours.
That's what we want. That's why that episode has to happen first, and then we can come to the presentation. Not a problem at all. Okay, so you were saying something. I cut you off. Then you were saying something
So
about
you
the
want us to go with the beautiful mind,
Yes,
or
yes, 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 yes. I think that's much better. Let's go for that, and then we can do the presentation after that.
okay?
I hope you have time. Like, please keep you. I hope you've kept time.
Yeah, I did keep time.
Perfect.
Okay, so we're in a beautiful mind, I guess, right?
Yes, that's where we are. That's where we are. So now the UN, and there is more to the UN. You just don't leave it there. Your experience in Harlem, staying there, all that. I mean, it was an interesting experience.
Pardon? I didn't understand.
Living in Harlem that time and all that
Oh,
experience, all that.
okay. Living in Harlem, that was that was a cultural experience in itself. Okay, because this was during my internship, I was living in Harlem in 1993. Okay, when I was a student. The way that came about was that when I had to go to the United Nations to do this internship, it wasn't paid. Okay, so I said, okay, how am I going to be able to afford rents? At the time, the average rent, let's say in Midtown Manhattan, was like $2,000 to $3,000 a month for a one bedroom. A studio was about 1,000, 1,005. So I said, how am I going to afford this on a student salary? I have to go back to school. I have to pay my tuition fees, and I have to pay my living expenses in my other in my during my law studies. So I had friends that they were from Senegal. I had good friends from Senegal that were here. They were studying in Montreal, and we had studied together. We were studying actually in law school together, and the girlfriend of my one of my friends, her sister was living in Harlem. She was at the time she was studying at the school for Alvin Haley School of Dance. So she had also she had a roommate also, and she said, "Well, you could share." So she suggested, she goes, if you're going to New York for 4 months, why don't you share the apartment with my sister? She's living in New York, which was actually Harlem. You guys could split the rent, and it's a win-win situation. So we went to New York. We went on a weekend. And I met her sister. And we actually stayed in her apartment. And she said, "Sure." And so she welcomed me. And so I was living with two beautiful Senegalese women, young women, in Harlem, New York. Which was a cultural experience in itself, because I was in West Harlem, which was considered Spanish Harlem at the time. And when I arrived, it was not as, in 1993, it wasn't as regentrified as it is now. It was mostly low income, and I saw beautiful pre-war buildings, which were in really state disarray, like they needed to be renovated. And I remember I was looking at the structures of the building coming out of the subway, and I was saying, "Wow, there's beautiful pre-war buildings here, but they need renovation." Like the neighborhood needs a lot of renovation. And you could see it. It was really low income, but it was a wonderful neighborhood to live in. I mean, I went in with an open mind. I was very lucky. As we say in French, bien entourée. I was my friend's sister, Garcia, she was quite busy with her dance courses, and she also gave a lot of. They also gave a lot of performances. I went to a lot. It was an enriching cultural experience for me, both. In a sense that in culture, like I was able also to participate, to go to many to see many of her performances. I just met so many people of also different cultures while not only in my work at the United Nations, but with my roommates whom I lived with. So it was wonderful. But I have to say, it was funny to see a white woman living in, it wasn't a very culturally diverse neighborhood, I have to say. Okay.
That's the politically correct way to say it, is it?
Pardon?
That's the politically correct way to say it. Not very diverse.
Well, yes. It was mainly African American or Spanish American. And I recall I had, but I met many of the people in the neighborhood. When I have to say, when I first arrived at the airport, I have with all my luggage. I was going there for 4 months, so I said, "Oh my God, I have to work at the UN. I have to bring all my very formal outfits, and I have to dress properly in my suits and whatnot." So I had a lot of luggage, and I piled up. Quite a bit of luggage into the taxi cab. Now the taxi driver that took me from the airport to Harlem, the taxi driver was, how should I, a good caricature for the person was, I don't know if you remember the show Archie Bunker. There was a show in the 1970s, Archie Bunker. It was sort of the most politically incorrect white person you could come across. You could come across with, Polish. I wouldn't say a white supremacist, but somebody that wasn't exactly politically correct in their remarks. So I remember when I told him, "Okay, I'm going," I gave him the address, and he just looked at it. He says, "This is in Harlem. Are you sure you're going to the right address?" I said, "Yes, I am." Because I said, "This is where I'm going." He says, "Are you sure you want me to drive you there?" And I said, "Yes, I do." So he drove me to Harlem. I was on 145th in Amsterdam, which is really the heart of the West Side in Harlem. And I arrived there with all my luggage. And I have to say, there were, let's say, some unsavory individuals hanging around outside on the sidewalk. When I say unsavory, I mean they were involved in a kind of shady business at the time. Okay, so I see these young individuals, and the taxi driver's like, "Are you sure you want me?" He says, "Why are you coming to New York? Why are you coming to Harlem?" He starts asking me this as if he was my father, and I said, "Well, I'm coming in." I told him I'm coming to do an internship at the United Nations. So he says, "Are you actually getting paid for this?" And I said, "No." I says, "Young lady," he says, "if I was your father," he says, "I would tell you to pack your stuff up and go back home." And he says, "Well, you're not my father. I know what I'm doing." But thank you very much for the advice. So when we arrived there in Harlem, the guy literally asked me to pay him up front. He opened the trunk, and he didn't even come out of his car. So I had to unload the trunk all by myself with, I think I had 4 or 5 huge luggage. And here I am, petite woman trying to lug out all this luggage, and I piled it up on the street. But um, perceptions are, really importantly, this is a good example of how we perceive, we see what we want to see. And how our perceptions influence the way we think, and the way we act. So here I am, I turn around, and what do I see? I see all these young guys hanging around the corner, and you could see that they were involved in some kind of shady business, but they were nice guys. They came up to me and asked me if I needed help. And I just went, "Oh," I said, "Okay, thank you. I would really appreciate that." I said, and they actually carried all my luggage. These, up to, I had to go up to 3 flights of stairs to my friend's apartment. She lived on the third floor on top of a bodega. So here they are carrying my luggage up the stairs. Because my what my I remember ringing her doorbell, and she rung me in, and she didn't expect me to show up with so much luggage. I said, "Well, I'm coming for 4 months, plus I'm going to the UN, so I have to dress up. I have to dress properly." And I was a little bit of a fashionista at the time.
At the time.
So
At
you
the time,
can,
you're always one.
I guess so. That's part of my Italian background.
Yep.
So and here, it's my girlfriends are looking at me like, "Okay." So but they were really nice. These guys were really, really sweet. So they brought, they took my luggage. They brought it into the living room, and they didn't even ask for a tip or anything. I really thanked them. And actually they became my friend. We'd say hi to them every day. Uh, and they actually became, they were kind of like, although they were involved in shady business, I would say that they protected that neighborhood, because I had some, during my time there, I did have some incidences where it could have gone really bad. And when I knew that every time I got to that corner, they would be there, and I would just say, "Well, why don't you ask these guys, if I belong here or not?" So they kind of protected. They protected the neighborhood, because they were protecting their interests, obviously. So that was my first experience. I don't know if you would call it a mediation or negotiation, but um, keeping an open mind, I guess. I was quite naive, because I was very young at the time. But um, thanks to my, you could say, thanks to my naivety, it actually served its purpose.
Yeah.
But I did establish a lot of friendships with the people in the neighborhoods. What I learned very early on was to acknowledge people. It doesn't matter what, um, you don't judge what. It doesn't matter what realms of sight. Like, you say hi, because the person that's sitting there, that's actually begging on the street, asking for money or whatnot. They're human beings, and when you treat them with respect and dignity, you'll get the same treatment back. And I have to say that I did. I had a really wonderful experience in that sense.
Yeah, because I think the main thing is that someone's circumstances, because of that, they're doing what they're doing. But they're good human beings everywhere. It's just that circumstances take them where they take them. So that's okay. We can't say too much
Ex-
about that situation of theirs. We don't even know what the situation is. I mean, to go into that.
Exactly.
Yep.
exactly. You just go with the flow. So it was, it was, I went with the flow because my parents always taught me. There was one thing my father and my mom always repeated to us was that you treat everyone with respect. It doesn't matter what they do. Everyone is useful. And that's what I went with, and I think that's what always resonated with me with the United Nations. I mean, human rights and rights of the person, and every individual is
Yeah.
the basically uh, is to respect human life, and not to judge, not to
Absolutely.
judge, because everyone has their place in society. It doesn't matter what you do. And I like I said, even those unsavory individuals had their place in society, and they had a very they were like my guardian angels
Mm.
in Harlem. So so from there I moved on. I would go to work. I would go to work every morning at the United Nations. I would take the A train, and I'd go from one reality, from one world to another. But for in my mind, I saw it as, I said, no, this is fantastic, because this is a great learning experience. This gives me an idea of, you know, uh, the work that I'm doing at the United Nations is extremely important. Here I am in a developed country, um, one of the head member states, but the work that we're doing is actually to service member states which are not as developed, underdeveloped. So this gives you an inkling. It's not the reality of what other people are living elsewhere in the world, but it will give you an inkling of what you should be keeping at the back of your mind when you go and and undertake your work at the UN, and it keeps you humble, basically. It does, and that's I think that's something that many of us need to remember. Um, so when I went to the UN, um, like I said, I walked in there. I took so much pride in my work, and I was always walking in smiling. So I got to know most of the security guards, not only at the gate, but inside. They were like an extended family. Um, I still remember at the time they had John he used to man the elevators, although the elevators are obviously automatic, but you always had somebody, there was a desk there, and if there was always a problem or whatnot, John was, we used to call him the elevator man. And I would walk in with a smile, so I would always say hi, and always chit chat with what they would call the general personnel. Okay, there was a professional, and there was a general staff, but I got to know the general staff very well, including everyone in the cafeteria who was serving us.
What benefits did you get from that? You have to tell us
I
that.
got a lot of benefits. Myself and the other, they would pile. I mean, we'd go and we'd go and order our lunch, and they would pile on the food. I was, there's too much food on this plate. I can't eat all this. We did get benefits because they were so appreciative of the fact that we acknowledged them, and that we stopped to talk with them, and there's just the friendliness of the place. It was a wonderful place to work. Like I said, that the socializing was fantastic. So I mean I but the most interesting conversations was actually with the general staff. I actually got to know also the maintenance guys, personnel, because um, I had just before the General Assembly opens in September. Usually, it's at around September 21st. They would organize. I'm sure this is not going to go on this year because of the pandemic, unfortunately. But they would organize a party for the United Nations staff, and they had. Uh, Live bands playing, and in different sections of the UN. So I said, I'm definitely going. So I went, and when I went to this social event, um, I, you know, I started. I went. Obviously, I was alone. I went on my own, and um, I had some advances, let's say, from that I didn't like from certain people, and I went up to one of the security guards, and I asked them if I could hang out with him. I said, I don't know how to handle this. I was very young at the time, so I didn't know how to basically push back, like ask somebody that I was tell someone I wasn't very interested in, you know, hanging out with them. So I went to, I spoke to one of the security guards. So what he did was he basically called the maintenance guys and told them to take care of me. So I started hanging out with the guys that used to work in the maintenance, and they actually gave me a tour. I didn't know this, but the United Nations has 3 floors underneath the main building. Okay, it's a 3 sub basements, which is a world in itself. All the machinery, everything that makes the UN function, all the systems. It's incredible. They even have a carpentry shop, and one of the guys that was in the maintenance was a carpenter. So I used to we became good friends. We started hanging out at the social event. We had a lot of fun, and we would actually meet up also after work, and everyone would go for drinks. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was an extended family, so they took care of um, they took care of us, like personnel, and the security guards at the UN are fantastic. I mean, people they underestimate the work that they do. A lot of them are former UN peacekeepers, or they're police officers, and people don't even realize the training that they have. Uh, they're really they keep that place really, really safe. They're, I would say, the heart of the United Nations is actually the maintenance staff, and people underestimate the importance of the work that they do. They take it for granted. It's not just the ambassadors that come in, because the ambassadors are just coming in from the member states. They're just coming in for the General Assembly, like they're coming in for 3 to 6 months at a time. But it's the general staff, the permanent staff that works there, that is really the heart, and is the machine that keeps the United Nations working. And they really service everyone, be it the member states, or the people that are going through, are walking through and coming into the building, like for the meetings. So that's what, when they say the United Nations family, that's what we're talking about. And I had the privilege of meeting many of them, and honestly, they were like an extended family, because many of us, like myself, we're coming in from we're coming on our own from different countries. You have to remember, we're coming into a big city, whether it be New York or other parts of the world where the United Nations has its buildings. But we're coming from different cities, and we're leaving our families behind, and our well-known friends. So you have to create a new friends. You need to meet other people, and you do need people around you. And so these were my friends. But like I said, my extended family, I would say, were the personnel from the maintenance staff. They were fantastic. Great sense of humor. Real people.
The important thing was they made you feel safe. That was the best part.
Yeah, they made me feel safe. And in fact, sometimes when I used to work late, because especially during this period, actually the end of August, the beginning of September, I would work late, past 6:30, maybe even sometimes. There was a couple of times I even had to work there until midnight, because I had to get, we had emergency, like we had last minute, we had to serve the legal office, basically the work itself. Okay, we basically had to serve the secretariat and the member states, But don't forget the treaty section, not only did it register treaties, but um, there was one time, I still remember, I had to work on some research. There was a negotiation that had to take place, a very, very important negotiation that was supposed to take place the next day. The president of the United States was coming in, that the current president at that time. And I had to have a legal opinion ready. And I remember it was a last minute mandate that I received. It was like at 4:30 in the afternoon. And I was like, oh my God. And I had to have this memorandum ready before 8:30 in the morning. So I was working there until after midnight. Since the more I started working on it at 4:30. I had to do some research at the time. Okay, now I'm moving forward to 1997 when I was a legal officer. At the time, the internet was not as developed as it is now. I had to do manual research in the Dag Hammarskjöld library. So basically, you literally had to go into the books, into the international law books, you had to go and look into the treaties, and we're talking
Prehistoric times. We're talking prehistoric
prehistoric times. Okay, we're talking where you're like, okay, where you have a pile of books before you. So I mean, I had to get hold of the librarian before they left, at least just to locate where the reference books and the reference documents that I needed, because I had to document also. I needed some backup. I needed to refer to jurisprudence and whatnot. So I had to locate that very quickly and draft some kind of memorandum. It was basically a legal opinion, so I had to back it up. Obviously, it's not just off the top of my head. I had a theory, but I needed to back it up. You can't just throw something out there, and it requires solid backing. And so I remember I was working there. I was literally burning the midnight oil. And where was I going with it? Oh, yes. So the maintenance personnel and the security officers, they would do basically the security officers would do their rounds all the time, and they came upstairs. I still remember they came into my office, "You're still here." And they were so sweet. They even brought me a supper. They went down to the cafeteria. They let me go grab something for you. And I managed to prepare the memorandum, to work on the memorandum, draft it, type it out, print it out, and put it on my director's desk. And then I had to be there early in the morning before 8 o'clock so that we could discuss it. The meeting was taking place at 10 a.m. So everything had to be prepared. And the meeting was going to be happening in the Secretary General's office with the president and a member of another official from another member state. At this point, I can't say which one. And I can't really tell you what the issue was about, but I could tell you that it was a very hot issue. And I'm proud to say that what I had suggested, what I came up with, was actually well received, and was actually used during the negotiations between the president and the member state. The theory that I came up with it wasn't really a theory. It was a theory, but at the same time, it was based on law. It was I could tell you that it was based on the law of contracts.
Okay.
Because we're dealing with treaties. Okay, so that's what I basically what I did was I did because of my civil law background, I was able to and my international law background, I was able to combine the theory of international law and international treaty law with the law of contracts, which was interesting in itself. So that's what I could tell you that I did. Now, since I was burning the midnight oil, I was there till after 12:30, and the security officers knew that I was there. And because they were good friends since my previous year, since 1993, since my internship, they came up and they would check on me. And when they told me, let us know when you're finished, we'll walk you. At that time, when I was a legal officer, then I was able to afford an apartment in Midtown
That's
Manhattan.
exactly what I was thinking. In the middle of the night, you're going to Harlem. We don't
No, no, I
want that.
wasn't going to Harlem at that time.
Good, good.
By then, that was in 1997. I was able to afford to live in an apartment close to the United Nations, let's say a few blocks away. So they walked me home. Basically, they said, "We'll walk you home." You're not going to walk home alone at this time. It's so like I said, they took care of their personnel. It was a family. It was an extended family. So I when I finished, I called down and I said, well, I'm actually ready to go home. And okay, we'll walk you back. And they were really sweet. I mean, honestly, everybody helped each other. Like I said, it was everybody did their part, and it was a collaborative effort. You see, I worked on my mandate, which in the treaty section, and they actually they did their part in taking care of us in security. Like they went over and above, and they walked me home, they door to door, which honestly, till this day, and every time I go back to the United Nations, I always check, okay, is he still there? Is this person still there? Did he retire? I always make a point of seeing if they're still working there, because it's such a wonderful feeling just to meet up with them and just to exchange stories, because we have a lot of stories also. We would socialize also after work. A lot of some of them were very, very talented in they'd sing. There was a few of them that were a part of a quartet, and they would sing, and they would invite me to their some of their performances. It was such an enriching experience, I have to say. Um, so like I said, I had the privilege of meeting people from all realms of all walks of society, from my earlier days in Harlem, from people begging on the street, to my days at the UN, in the General Assembly, walking into the General Assembly or walking into the Security Council, and exchanging with ambassadors and representatives of different members of states. And of course, the personnel at the UN, which stem from every corner of the globe, and it was just wonderful. And that experience has, I would say, that's what influenced my decision also to become a mediator. Because then when my contract was up at the United Nations, I returned to Canada, and I was already basically, I had applied for the Canadian government to work with the federal government. I had applied when I was a student, and for some reason my name was still in their system. And it was funny. I returned on the Friday, and I didn't even have time to unpack my luggage. And on the following Monday, I was called in for an interview with the federal government. And this was in 1998, 99, I would say. I didn't even have time to buy a laptop at the time. So anyhow, I went to this interview blindly. I didn't have time to do any research on the department, the mandate, whatnot. So I went into an interview with the federal government, and I was given an exam in French because I'm working in the Quebec region, although it's government of Canada. I was given an exam in French at the time, a practical exam. It was mostly case scenarios and whatnot. I answered, it was a 3-hour exam, and then I had an interview both in French and in English. And then I went home. I said, okay. Oh, and I still remember during the interview, they asked me, well, what do you know about the mandate of our department? And I was, honestly, I was very frank. I said, I don't know anything. I just returned from New York. My mindset is still at the United Nations. And I didn't even have a chance to do some research on the mandate of this department, what you're involved in and what kind of file, what is your mandate, what's your raison d'etre, what kind of files, I'm sorry, but I was able to answer the practical exam because it was mostly based on how you would be dealing with stakeholders, um, how you would resolve certain issues, how you would approach. It was a practical exam in that sense. It was not a theoretical. It wasn't based on uh, the mandate of the department itself. So I thanked them. I said, I remember walking out of there and telling myself, there's no way you're going to get this job. There's no way. How can you walk into an interview without even knowing what kind of work they're doing? It's like it's like walking into a courtroom without knowing what case you're going to plead, which actually happened to me once.
You're not supposed to talk about that.
That happened to me once.
Yeah, you're not supposed to talk about that. You're not supposed to tell us that.
Oh, so I think I had that all took place in the morning, and I think by I was finished by 2 o'clock, and I didn't even have the chance to get home to my parent. I was living at my parents' place. I had just returned from New York, so I said I have to find I returned back to my parents' home, and my mom, she tells me some guy called from the Canadian government, and he wants you to call him back. I said, okay. Did he leave a number or whatnot? So I called back, and then lo and behold, it was one of the persons that had interviewed me, and he asked me if I was ready. This was a Wednesday. I still remember. I had the interview. No, I had the interview on a Monday, and he asked me if I was willing to come in on the Wednesday, 2 days later, to start.
Oh, wow.
Where I'm like, oh, okay, sure, I'm free. And so, my career with the federal government of Canada began. But I was still a student at the time because I was doing my bar. I was going through. I was also going through my my bar studies because in law school here in Canada, we have to become a member of the bar association. So at the time I was at bar school, and so I started working as a student, and then I eventually I became when I finished my bar studies, and I became permanent, and so I began my career in the federal government, the Canadian government of Canada.
Well, you have to tell us about all that, all the interesting work that you've done with the government, because you've done a lot of work there. I mean, interesting work there.
Okay, well, it's over 21 years now. How many years? It's quite a while now. Um, I've had the opportunity to work in very many different files. The difference between working in private practice and, let's say, in the government and as a civil servant with the federal government is that um, I find the training is very good. Whatever file they give you, whatever mandate that they give you, they train you very well. Okay, because the standards are very high. Um, your performance is we have performance reviews twice a year. Before it used to be once a year, but now it's twice a year. But anyhow, but the standards of performance are extremely high in the Canadian federal government. So because of that, they have, they're very conscientious. I mean, I love being a civil servant, whether it be at the United Nations, when I was at the UN, or my mindset is civil service. I like to service the public. So it fit me very well. Um, I had the opportunity to be given very interesting files. I've worked in constitutional law issues dealing with minorities, official languages. I've had the opportunity to work with also with international refugees. I worked at the Administrative Tribunal, which is the Immigration Refugee Board of Canada. I actually pled um, as a lawyer, but representing the federal government. Those are cases of claimants that claim refugee status. That happened actually 2 years after I entered the federal government. Because when I came into the Department of Employment and Social Development Canada. At the time, it was called the HRSDC, Human Resources, or whatever. But anything dealing with employment and immigration were always two different departments, but they were at the time they were considered one. They used to consider employment and immigration together. Then they split the departments. So when I came in, I was on the employment side, but I was given files dealing with program management, with social programs. At the time when I came in, the reason why I was recruited was because there was a huge case that was going on in that department. There was a sponsorship scandal. Unfortunately, there were programs. Let's just say contributions which were given to certain organizations, entities, which were considered friends of certain ministers. So basically, I had to work there was a judge at the time, Judge Gomery. There was a commission that was going on, a royal commission. They were reviewing all the files, and we had to look at the legal aspects of it. I didn't particularly like that that work itself, because we had to go through all the files and see if all the legalities were with respect to the files, with respect to program criteria, were respected. Okay, if not, the files have to be set aside, they have to be reviewed. Some of the funding had to be returned, and we're talking millions and millions of dollars. It wasn't small amounts of money. And these were programs that sponsorship. They were programs which funded organizations in different in Canada, basically, but mostly in the Quebec region. So that's what I had to work on. I wasn't crazy about that, but that didn't last long, which I was happy with. We had to review the files, and then he had to set up the commission. So from there, I moved on to different files with different organizations, and I was given constitutional law files. There was Canada has two official languages, English and French. Okay, and in the rest of Canada, French-speaking population is considered a minority, and in Quebec, the province of Quebec is the only province. It's a French-speaking province, so French is the official language. But both languages are official. But I mean, French is the predominant language. Let's just say. So English speakers are considered minorities. So organizations that receive funding, there's different organizations in, let's say, in education or whatnot, that receive funding from government, whether it be provincial or at the federal level. It could be for anything, for different programs, for job skills or whatnot. Because I'm talking about now, that department that I was working for was employment and Immigration Employment Canada. So they would give funding to create jobs to organizations, non-governmental organizations or whatnot. They still do, to create social programs. Okay, to promote employment and to give training to civil, to different to have training for people so that they can access the job market. Okay, now a lot of the organizations, some of them would feel discriminated against because they said some of the there was preference given to let's say English speaking or French speaking, and they can file a complaint before the official language commissioner, and there was a tribunal. So I was basically given the mandate to work with these stakeholders for our department. So I was involved in committees and whatnot. And my job was basically to create partnerships and whatever complaints there were, to ensure that they were handled and whatnot. And I also had to I actually had to manage disputes, because there was a lot of disputes between organizations because they would compete. And that's where my introduction also to mediation came in. I realized, wow, I had training. I had some training in mediation. Let's just say very general training in mediation theory. And at the time it was mediation and more arbitration when I was in law school. Because when I was in law school, this was in 1990s. Okay, so there wasn't much formative training as there is now. So I understood let's say the general principles of behind mediation, the fundamentals, but I didn't know the techniques yet. I wasn't very familiar with the techniques, and I understood also the mindset a little bit, about behind negotiation. But my mindset was more evaluative, because I was trained as a lawyer in law school. So it's like, it's more competitive. It's like you negotiate because you have to get to the solution, at all costs. So that was more my approach at the time. But I was involved with, so I was basically the liaison person for the department with a lot of these organizations in the programs in our region for Quebec, because we had, for Canada's a huge country, so from coast to coast we have obviously civil servants that are doing the same job, but in different provinces. So I was represented the Canadian government, but in the Quebec region. So I was working with organizations in the official language file, which basically it was minority organizations which considered themselves minorities in Quebec, which were mostly English-speaking organizations. And I used to go to meetings. I was the liaison person. I was basically the troubleshooting for them. I was the ear on the ground, and I would come back and I would report back to the minister, the deputy minister, and if there were meetings that needed to take place, I would organize them, and also negotiations. So I started getting involved in negotiations and in conflict management, and I realized, wow, I need training. I don't feel equipped, properly equipped to do this job. Because I don't know how. At the time I realized that I was lacking in, well, how do I evaluate, how do I assess, like, what's the I needed structure. So at the time the Ministry of Justice used to had a training in basic training. They would they would service the departments, and they would basically hire consultants to give some basic training in negotiation and mediation. And I took that training, and I started it, and I loved it. I took the basic training in negotiation, principles of negotiation, and the mediation. And I really liked the language. It was mostly interest-based negotiations, based on the book Getting to Yes from Robert Urey and Fisher, Urey and Fisher from Harvard. That was the model that everybody was going by at the time. And I started applying this in my day-to-day work, and I started seeing results, actually, and I really enjoyed it. But I realized I still needed training in facilitation, because I had to also animate meetings and facilitate between groups, because we had many organizations and they were competing, and sometimes we had to organize forums of discussion, because we used to do a lot of consultations. A big thing with the federal government is, like, they like in a democracy, is that they like to consult with organizations, which is an effective way of working with organizations. So I was involved in that a lot. But so I started that, and from there, there was a program at the time at the federal government with the Ministry of Justice. It was the Interdepartmental Co-Mediators Program, and I became part of that. I became a co-mediator. I was not yet an accredited mediator. You basically had to co-mediate a certain number of cases before you became accredited. So you had to co-mediate with an experienced mediator, right? And there wasn't that many. Most of the mediators that would mediate were, let's say, experienced lawyers or retired judges at that time. And so I was involved in that, but for the official language file. And I was called upon, I still recall, I was called upon to co-mediate a case between two organizations, two national organizations, very well known. There was a lot of competition between them, and unfortunately, the directors had a falling out, and because of the falling out between the directors and the relations soured, and it affected the work, and it affected the work and the effectiveness, obviously, of the work that they did on the ground. And it started affecting communities, because the federal government used to fund them, but at the same time, they also mandated them, in the regions, because Canada is a huge country. So they would mandate them to work in certain regions, but it affected regionally, it affected I remember this was in the Maritimes. I had to go there, and we had to hold a facilitation session. That was fantastic. It was very interesting. We literally had a forum, a consultation, a forum of discussion between representatives of these organizations and community members from of a certain region in the Maritimes, and we had to use techniques, facilitation techniques, mediation techniques, and have everyone have their say. So they needed to vent, basically, so because we needed to bring the communities together in order for them to work effectively together. And it was successful. It took a while. It took several meetings, and within a span of a few months, but we managed to get everybody at the table. And then we created a national committee, and we would invite them to the committee sessions, and they were able to also present their concerns and whatnot. And from there, what we did was we created consultation sessions, yearly consultation sessions, and we would have quarterly committee, national committee meetings, and we would displace the committee meetings in different parts of the country. So it was great. I was able to travel from coast to coast. What an experience! I was able to travel from British Columbia all the way to the Maritimes and see the different cultures of and the different regions of this beautiful country that I live in. So that was an experience in itself. Now, so that started happening in the first years that I was working in the federal government. So while I was doing that, at the time, I had a colleague that was working at the Immigration Refugee Board as a refugee. He was a lawyer, but we used to call them, when you were a representative of the Canadian government, he was a refugee protection officer. So he came to do a secondment in our department, and we actually worked together quite closely on different files, different agreements, huge agreements between provinces of, the Canadian government always has agreements because Canada is a federation of provinces. We have Canada, we have the federal government, but we have the different provinces. The provinces have their own legislations and legislators. So we work in collaboration with the provinces. So we always have agreements between the federal government and the provinces. So we were working on, obviously, an agreement between the federal government and the Quebec province, because I'm situated in Quebec. And we had to negotiate. At the time, they were, what would you call them? Employment agreements, because we were, we were transferring certain mandates to the province. For instance, anything dealing with employment, recruitment issues, or the administration of, like looking for employment, employment, although the Employment Act is federal, but anything dealing with certain, anything dealing with, I would say, education, because Canada, there's so much to say. I would have to go into the Canadian Constitution.
Okay, not too much. But the main thing is the Canadian bureaucracy very bureaucratic? What is it like? It is.
So we were involved in negotiations, and we worked closely. And then my colleague went back to his post, but our work relationship was quite pleasant. We collaborated very well. We complemented each other very well. He had a lot of he had excellent courtroom experience, and my forte was more in the partnership building, and in the background that I had in negotiation, mostly in collaboration. So there was a need at the Immigration Refugee Board there was a backlog of cases, and he thought of me. He says, would you like to come and help out, because we need to get rid of this backlog. The cases are really backing up, and it's starting to affect basically the constitutional rights, of the claimants, because you can't have a case backlog more than 2 years, because then it becomes you can't hold a case too long, because then it affects their rights, So I said, sure, I'd be interested. So I ended up I went and I worked for a year at the Immigration Refugee Board to help to basically get rid of that backlog. And I had so many cases. I loved it. I really loved the work, because what it brought for me, it was a combination of working in. It brought together my legal background, my law, obviously my training in I had to plead, and it was, although it was an administrative tribunal, but what I loved about it was the human rights aspect. I also had to learn the country conditions of the different countries that I was from the cases that I had from the claimants from the different countries, and I worked with with cases dealing rising from countries from. I had a lot of cases from Pakistan at the time. We had a lot of refugee claimants. By that, this was in 2000 2001, 2002. See, after 9/11 happened in 2001, Canada had a lot of refugee claimants that were coming in. There were a lot of claimants that were coming in. They were claiming refugee status. They were coming in from the United States because at 9/11, changed the mindset of the way the refugee claimants were being, and the immigration laws were being treated, let's say in the United States. We had a huge surge of refugee claimants coming to our borders, coming in from the United States, claiming refugee status from the United States, but they were not Americans. They were coming from different countries, mostly from Pakistan, Sri Lanka. Some of them had been in the United States for years as undocumented, let's say, undocumented individuals, let's say. So we had a backlog of cases, and basically we had to manage these cases. So I had a lot of cases from Pakistan, so I had to learn the country conditions and whatnot. I had to learn we had huge binders, which were updated on a weekly basis with the conditions, and I had to learn a lot about the culture and the different cultures, and from the countries that I was dealing with. I also had cases from Iraq. I had some from Zimbabwe also. It was during the Mugabe regime. So for me, I really enjoyed it because I was able to use my background in international law, human rights, and also law itself, and to basically process the cases. There were weeks where I had 10 cases, 2 cases a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Okay. And a lot of the cases were very similar because there were claimants that were claiming refugee status on the grounds of being persecuted because of their religion. Let's say some were Sunnis, and the others were, oh my God, right now it's escaping me. In Pakistan, Sunnis and
the Shias and the Sunnis.
Shias. So that's what when I refer to when I tell you that, oh my God, I did have an issue where I didn't know the case I was pleading. I mixed up the cases one day because the names of the claimants were so similar. I had prepared my cases, obviously. Okay, the names of the claimants were so similar in both cases that this is an anecdote in itself. I still remember that day. I had 2 cases, okay, from Pakistan. And the name of the claimants for the 2 different cases were so similar. I think the difference was one letter, okay? And so what happened was I missed that morning when I went into my office and I took the file. I mean, I obviously, I was already ready for both cases, but you prepare your cases beforehand, obviously. I took the wrong file because I misread the name. So I went into the hearing room and I opened the file and I'm just about to start pleading. So I mean, thank God, I didn't have to do the opening. looking at the case, and I was working with a very good commissioner. She was excellent. She was really thorough. I was very lucky in that sense. So she started, she started introducing the case, and I'm like, this doesn't sound right. Like something's off over here. She's talking. I'm like, mm. So, and then the opening statements from the opposing counsel, and I'm like, okay, so it's my turn. So what I did was like, oh my God, I think I have the wrong case. I think it's the other one. So I asked for a health break. I just said, I'm sorry, I just need a quick health break, and I really, really need a health break badly because everything is recorded. And we took a small break. I ran upstairs and I picked up the right file, and I was like, okay, thank God. Okay. And I was able to, I managed to get through my case, and it was fine. Um, but the, uh, the reason why I also mixed up the cases is because the facts were so similar. Literally, it was almost copied and pasted. It was just incredible. But that was really flying off the seat of my pants. So I learned you have to keep a cool head. You know, uh, you just yeah, you just go with it, go with the flow. If there was one thing that this is what if there's one thing if I sum up my experience with my work in the federal government is, yes, you definitely always have to be prepared, and even as a mediator, you always have to be prepared, but you also have to you always have to keep in the back of your mind something's always going to go wrong, and you just have to stay calm, cool, and collected and carry on and find a solution. Basically, that's it.
But one question that you don't have to answer is, how bureaucratic is the bureaucracy?
How bureaucratic? Um, it could get very bureaucratic, but at the same time, there's a lot of flexibility also. It's not as bureaucratic as it depends on what type of work you're doing. But it is, yes, that was the actually, that's a good question, because that was what I had. You know what? That was my learning curve when I walked into not only the federal government, but also at the United Nations as a civil servant. I had to learn how to deal with bureaucracy. I had to learn how to navigate. I had to learn where my place was. Um, it's not the same as in private practice where you're basically leading. Uh, it's you can become a leader, but at the beginning you have to eat a lot of humble pie, and it is, and you have to follow the policy. Um, so I would say it's quite bureaucratic.
But supposing you have a situation where you know this is what has to be done, and people don't understand, how much can you push?
I did have situations. I constantly have situations like that. That's the story of my life. That's the story of my life. So that's why you get the standard operating procedure answers from the civil servant. That's on the other end. Um, I mean, I'm lucky that um, at the level that I'm at, I can influence. Uh, I'm very lucky, and that's due to my professional level. But yeah, uh, if you don't like it, then you leave. If it doesn't jive, let's just say, with your personal values, then you leave. It's funny that you should say that, because I think as soon as I started in the government, I think a few months in, when I was working on the sponsorship files, the ones with the first files, which I really were very formative, but I really wanted to get out of there because they were very political. I remember receiving a phone call from a very influential, let's just say influential not organization, a private entity, well-known worldwide, the president of this entity, and saying, well, I want funding for this program. And it was, we're not talking peanuts, we're talking in the millions and billions of dollars. And basically I had gone through the file, and I said, he doesn't qualify under the federal government for this type of funding, because it dealt with education, it dealt with training, and training is not our mandate. Training is under the provincial jurisdiction. Okay, so I had to refuse. So the person was not very happy. And do you know who I am? And do you know who I know? And so and so. And I said, well, I know who you are. I know of you. I don't know you personally. Yes, I understand. He says, I can call, his contact was all the way to the top, to the prime minister's office. So he said, I'm going to call the prime minister. I said, go right ahead. It's a free country. That's fine. But I'm not going to change my decision. I'm sorry. I have to follow the law, because as a civil servant, we're bound by a code of ethics. We are bound by following Treasury Board laws, the Privy Council. There's so many laws I can't even begin to tell you. Okay. And the minute we step over them, well, you're responsible, because you're representing a machine. You're representing a government. It's not a person that you're representing. You're representing a whole country. So it's a big responsibility. So I remember that call went all the way to, it trickled down to my director, and I was called into the office. And so I said, I was ready to, I didn't care. I said, you know what? I just passed my bar. I was still young. I said, I just went through the grueling exercise of going through all my bar school and passing my bar exams, and I'm not going to give. I'm not going to lose all that because some president of some company and whatnot wants a favor done. I couldn't care less. If you want to fire me right here. But I'm doing my job, and I'm following the law. I'm not going to break the law. I'm called by a code of ethics, and that's it. That's all. And obviously, I wasn't popular. So I said, if you want the file, you can take it. Be my guest. And that's where it ended. And I drew the line right there and then. And I was known for that. And actually, I acquired a reputation for that. For
Well,
not
people respect
stepping.
that. People respect that. It's not that they might not be
Yeah,
convenient for them, but they do respect that aspect.
yeah.
Definitely.
Actually, that's the reputation that followed me till this day. Even when I actually had this a similar incident also at the UN. At the United Nations, I had a similar incident, and I stood my ground. Although it was not well received by a certain official, I stood my ground. I had incidences also at the UN where, because I was in the treaty section, and because I was, registering the treaties, I was checking, like I had to ensure that everything was to the letter of the law, and conform and whatnot. And I had to get back to the member states, to the representatives. It could be ambassadors. I had ambassadors coming into my office offering me. This was great. I got offered tickets to go to the opera, you name it. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't. I mean, it's really nice, but I'm going to buy my own ticket. I'm going to have to refuse, you're just going to have to, and it would go by priority also. It was the first, first, the way we used to register also the treaties was depending on when it was deposited at the secretariat, and depending on when everything was basically conformed to the standards. and it went on a first come first served basis. But you have to be fair. You can't. Let's just say you're not supposed to be privileging one country over another. You really
But tell
have
me,
to
yeah.
maintain that neutrality. It's difficult, but you have to do it. And I could say that I managed to do it in my work. You're not always popular, but that's the way it is.
No, but tell me one thing, with the Canadian government now, the matters which involve the government, mediation in those matters, how does it work? I mean, how do you actually, you're settling something and a bureaucrat doesn't want to be seen as someone who is in some way favored someone and put it across in that manner. How does that whole mediation work?
Okay, well, it depends. It depends on the dispute itself. The Canadian government is a huge, huge, huge structure. There's different types of, there's different, obviously, there's different departments, there's different mandates, there's different types of disputes. Which I was going to discuss in my,
Yeah, okay. So whatever you're going to discuss there, then we can leave it for that. Because if it's coming out, I actually rest, that aspect can come out there. Yeah.
that's going to come
Yeah,
up
perfect,
because it,
perfect.
it
We can do
it's
that.
it's that's a big question. It's too big. Like,
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
okay, but what I can the example that I could give you that is it was the one that I did say was in the official language file that I was involved in. There was again a dispute between um, two organizations because they were sitting with us at the national committee table. I would meet with them individually, okay, and try to air it out with them. And if we weren't able to resolve that dispute at that level, then we would say, okay, you can go into mediation. And there was that administrative tribunal where they have either mediators or a roster of mediators or a roster of arbitrators that they could go before, which
No, but
becomes
yeah.
more of a neutral formal process. But
No, but I think,
we try to resolve it through dialogue, basically one on one.
no, what
If
I'm saying
it's
is that,
if,
yeah, no, my basic question is where I'm coming from is that when there is a matter involving the government and there's a mediation
Pardon?
happening, there's a matter involving the government and then there's a mediation which is taking place. Now, the person from the government who, I mean, someone who's representing the government in that mediation and a settlement has to go through. Now, getting onto that, whatever that settlement terms are, it can be seen that there can be corruption in the system and you might settle for something which you shouldn't have settled for. Do these issues come up? Because I'm just thinking that, look, in countries where there is so many matters which involve the government, and if they can go for mediation, it'll be excellent. But I feel from the bureaucrats perspective, are they going to settle, or they always will have that fear they'll be questioned tomorrow as to why did they settle at this? I mean, how does that work?
Well, it depends on the issues. Obviously, they're going to try to work towards settlement. Okay, but um, the objective the objective on the part of the civil servant is always to try to they have to stay within the parameters of their mandate. Okay, so the government is not supposed to surpass the parameters of its mandate, that particular department or that's a civil servant. Okay, that's the standard that they would abide by. Um, so they're not just going to settle for the sake of settling, uh, unless it comes at a different level, a political level, a higher level, interstate conflicts or whatever, international or whatnot, where there's been backroom discussions that went with that, that have already taken place, and there's some kind of practical agreement, an agreement that's kind of in the back of their mind. Then they'll formalize it in a certain way. But
But with this, I'm telling you, this is something which has interested me in how to work this out. Because look, you can have certain parameters that you can go up till here, you can go down to this. Now,
Hmm.
for a government not to put that out straight away is also incorrect. You're not really negotiating with people. You should not be negotiating with people. Okay, this is what we can do. It has to be something like that. So there's not really any should not be any negotiation happening from the government's perspective. I don't see that's not. I don't think that's the correct way for the government to do it. Okay, this is the best we can do. It's like that. So, but if you give a
Yeah.
range, yeah, because if you give a range, then you're leaving it to a bureaucrat's discretion, and in that discretion, I don't even think that's the right thing for a government to do.
Well, yes and no, because you could say, from the perspective of the person that's on the receiving end of that settlement, they might consider it's not always the best way. But the thing is, you have to remember that the government itself has to respect its laws. It can't break its own laws. It's not
Yep.
supposed to, in theory and in practice also. Okay, like you have to navigate through um, a plethora of different legislation. Okay, so you have to stay in the realms of that. There's so much leeway you have, and then your hands are tied. Basically, then it goes at a different level. It goes to a political level. It doesn't go down. It's not the civil servant. It goes to a different level. If it goes beyond the scope of the mandate of that civil servant, it's going to go to a higher level.
Yeah.
That's what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
I'm just thinking that wherever there is money involved, yes, there can be an issue there. But maybe whereas there are policy matters which need certain kind of a negotiation, that I think that makes sense for. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's the difference. Maybe.
yeah. Well, the policy matters. The way it's negotiated is you have a consultation. You basically consult with, let's say, the organizations that are involved. Okay, with whatever social issues they are, uh, you hear them out. Okay. Uh, and then you could come to an agreement that, okay, there's needs to be more study on this. There needs to be a committee that has to be set up. There has to be more discussions. So it's ongoing. That's why certain negotiations take years and years and years, because it's too complex.
Yeah.
It's a complex
No,
issue,
I
and that's
think
why people say, "Oh, the government is slow and whatnot." And
no, I
you
should
know,
not have picked up. You should not have picked up the mediation discussion here. Yes, we should do it in the symposium
yeah,
discussion. I think, yeah, maybe.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Here we have to
in
talk
that
about
case,
you. First of all, how is your father? I didn't ask you that.
my father is, as you know, he's 99 and a half. He wants to make it to 100 in January. Um, he has good days and he has not so good days. But he's at home. Uh, his hospice. He's in palliative care, but he's at home. Um,
He's all right.
Considering that he's in palliative care, he's doing pretty well. He's not as autonomous as he used to be. My father was, uh, as you know, he immigrated from Italy in the um, in the 50s. Came here on his own. He was a World War II veteran, Italian World War II veteran. Very strong character, a very hard worker, and uh, he raised a family of 5 kids. I'm the only girl, and till he always worked very hard in his life, and it's very hard for him to lose a lot of his autonomy. Like he's homebound basically. He's starting to have problems walking now. He walks with a walker, and he's slower, but his mind is all there, and he's got a very strong character.
But I mean, he's lived an interesting life. That's a
Yeah.
life that we have to hear from you as to how what all. I mean, all those things, be part of the war and all that. I think that thing is really something which is. Those are things which will get lost, and what happened there, what he went through. Those are things which need to be recorded.
He has fascinating stories. I mean, I came across a few weeks, when was it? A couple of months ago, and I came across some pictures of him in World War II with his buddies. Um, I, I basically consolidated all the pictures in one place, and he sat down with me one afternoon, and he was telling me this guy and I was with him in this place in Turkey, and we were here and we were there, and some of them he died during the war, and he started telling me stories, and it's fascinating because he's 99 and a half years old, but his memory is so sharp. And when he goes back to when he starts retelling his stories about the Second World War, my father was when since he was an Italian soldier, uh, when the Italians changed the alliances, when Mussolini switched alliances from the Nazis to with the rest of the the member states, like the United States, Canada, the Italians became prisoners of the Germans. So my father was in a work camp. He was interned, and it wasn't easy. So when he starts telling me a story, when he starts recounting some of the stories, he actually speaks in German sometimes.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how the mind works. Um, there's things that he didn't tell us when we were younger, obviously, but now he's starting to recount certain stories, which are, yeah, he had a tough time. Let's just say, not only him, but also the other Italian soldiers. And my mom at that time was 12 years younger than my dad. When he was in the war, she was a preteen, like she was a little girl in her in southern Italy, and she recalls when the Americans arrived, when the American troops arrived, the tanks coming up the stairs in her town, like the big, the main steps of from the marina. Because they came in they came in from the beach. Okay, plus they had a fort on the beach. I actually saw that fort. I went to Italy, and it's fascinating. I mean, to see how history, how their lives were influenced. So she recalls when the Americans came in that they were passing out Tootsie Rolls to. She was a recipient of candies and chocolate bars, while my father was a prisoner on the other end. They didn't know each other then, obviously. They met here in Canada, you know, and when my
But how
father.
much of your connection with Italy has remained,
Pardon?
or how much of your connection with Italy has been there? How much of that culture have you imbibed? Has that culture remained or not?
That culture has remained, as you could probably tell from my accent, because I speak Italian at home with my parents. Um, they came here in the 50s. My father in 1950 and my mom in 1955. And basically, when they arrived here as Italian immigrants, they kept their culture, and also and they when they met and they got married and they had children, they basically brought us up speaking Italian at home. I never went to formal school in Italian. I learned it at home, and we were brought up with the Italian family traditions. But if you think of it, from the 1950s, so it's the unit, the family unit is very important. Um, obviously the cultural influences, including lots of food, the cooking,
And
and
the important
you
thing
know,
is you've picked up the hand gestures. Those
yes.
gestures is something that you picked up.
Well, the way it works in our household, in my parents' household, is the louder you speak, the more you're heard.
No, but interesting thing that you just said about them, that 1950s culture that they would have got and that you've retained here. It's a similar thing someone was telling me about the people from India, some certain rural background, they've gone into Canada, and what they've created is that maybe they moved in the 70s. So it's that village atmosphere of the 70s which they've retained here. and they haven't been able to get out of that. So I think the
That's right.
language, the dialect is it's just that. Because I think I found it very interesting that that village has been created here and it is still here. It is still in the 70s, although their own village has moved on. That is
That's right.
very
That's how it
interesting.
is in my parents' household. That's exactly it. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I was a little girl, and that's exactly it. I was brought up with that mindset. Um, Although I was a little bit more rebellious because I mean I grew up here. The thing with my parents was they were always open to education. So what distinguished them from a lot of the people from their era was the traditional role of the woman. Like my father was always very. I was always good at school. For some reason, I was always interested in education. So, in fact, when they had to go meet my teachers, for parents' teacher night, my mom would say, why do I have to go? They're going to tell me that you have straight A's. Who cares? So I was like, what? You should be proud. You should be happy. I used to be put down because it's like, so what, so what's the point of me? My mom, would say, what's the point of me going and meet your teachers? They always tell me the same thing. You're quiet, you're a good student, you know what? Because I was shy. I was very, very shy as a little girl. So I felt like I had to um, do my best all the time. That was also that was the influence of my parents. My parents always said you have to work hard, not be afraid of hard work, roll up your sleeves. I had to work hard at school, but also at home. I was expected, as the girl, as the only girl, I used to help to do the chores, wash the dishes, clean the house, do all the chores, and I still do till this day. I go over to my parents' place, and I still do. I go and do housework. It doesn't matter what level of education you have. You come
Exactly.
here, you put on the gloves, and you clean.
Exactly. But tell me, for the symposium, you have to give that time. So if you don't say short of time for that, that's also very important. So
Okay.
yeah, so make sure that you have to keep time for that. Don't tell me that, oh, I don't have time now, something like that, because that is important. That's
Okay.
yeah.
So if you want, we can.
We can shift there. Yeah, we can shift to that. But before leaving, is Khalid around or is he left?
No, he left a while
Okay,
ago.
okay. I
He's
thought maybe you
working.
would have said hi to him also. But
He's working at the store. I don't know if you wanted to ask a few more questions, or if you wanted to.
look, having conversations is always nice with you, and we can go on. I know that. So maybe we should just, yeah, maybe we can end this here, and we'll continue a conversation in that symposium thing. So maybe this episode of In Conversation with the Beautiful Mind we can end here. I'll stop the YouTube thing here. And thank you very much, Rosalia. I mean, it sounds scripted because I'm going to be saying hi to you there also.
Okay.
But
Well, it's always a pleasure, Vikram, talking to you. I mean, I don't realize how quickly the time passes when it's really a conversation, which I like this format. And
yeah,
time just flies.
exactly.
I mean,
2 hours just go. 2 hours is gone. You don't even know 2 hours have gone.
I can't believe 2 hours went by. I thought we were speaking for an hour.
No, that's the thing. That's the way it has to be. That's why these conversations are enjoyable. The time is not a factor. I just can't even think that there is a time frame that we have to put. And this could have gone on if the symposium thing wasn't there. So that's the
Okay.
only reason. So I'll switch that off this thing and then we'll stop that.
Okay.
Yep. Just give me 1 second.